2026 sees me travel the length and breadth of England to run a marathon per week in each of its 39 historic counties. Why? To raise funds for Tommy's, the charity that does incredible work to try to end the heartbreak of baby loss. I'll be joined each week by someone who has their own story of loss, their own rollercoaster journey, their own reason to be there. This podcast shares those stories in the hope that they can bring awareness to an often undiscussed topic and even, perhaps, a flicker of light in someone's darkness. You can follow the runs, the stories, and donate to the cause at marathonsformiracles.com. Enjoy. Hello, welcome to another episode of Marathons for Miracles. We're ticking along at a rate of knots, unlike the running, but we're into week 6 and another episode of the podcast. We've had some fantastic feedback on previous episodes, and we're just really grateful that people are actually listening, which is good. Another one very much worth listening to this week. We're talking to Louis, who joins us from, whereabouts are you, Louis?
Arden Grafton in Warwickshire.
Warwickshire, where we're going to be doing our grand tour the coming weekend. Louis was one of the first people to get involved. He was one of my first phone calls, a school friend of my brother-in-law, Will, and a story with which I was loosely familiar through Will and through my wife, Amy, someone that I 100% wanted to have involved in the challenge. And yeah, quite a story to tell, which I will allow you to do, Louis. But thank you very much for being so enthusiastic from very early on, and for that enthusiasm having lasted from probably May when we first spoke through until where we are now at the end of Jan.
Yeah, and it's real now, so we've got to do it.
Yeah, it's actually happening. So Louis, in typical fashion, I'm going to open the floor up to you and just ask what it is that led you to being involved with Tommy's and with Marathons for Miracles.
Yeah, so sort of very briefly, but so a few years ago, we sort of decided that we were going to start trying. For a family, a friend of ours had recently got pregnant, and the timing felt right. We were very settled where we were, and it was, we sort of said, yeah, let's go for it. Let's do it. Let's jump in. And we got pregnant very quickly. And that's a huge hurdle for a lot of people. And it felt like a real ticking box, okay, right, this can happen. This is so much uncertainty even about that, isn't there? And we went for a scan around the 6-week mark, quiet scan. And there were 3 fetal poles present. And they gave us the heartbeat wasn't there yet, but they said they developed slow and there's multiple fetal poles. So, come back in a week or 2. And we went through that whole thing. We're going to have to move straight away. Maybe we're not as settled as we thought. And as you all know, it doesn't really matter how far down that road you get when you see that first scan, and when you're told that it's real and it's happening, and it's from that day on you're 100%, aren't you? And unfortunately, I think it was a fortnight later, we went back and none were viable. And so it was that real early period miscarriage, and very, I suppose it's a huge swing from one side to another. You get very, very excited, and then it's gone. The rug's out from under your feet. But I'd say it's sort of a routine. It's probably the wrong word to use, but it was routine for the medical professionals who are dealing with us, and I completely understand that. But of course, it's not routine for you guys. Yeah, you're there. It's your whole life's been turned upside down, not once but twice within sort of an 8-week period, and Sophie handled that incredibly well. She researched everything to the nth degree. And we sort of said, no, look, the decision that we made originally is one we want to stick by. We're not going to give up, if you like. And again, we got pregnant very quickly. And this time round, everything was tracking really, really well. Had the 12-week scan. That was all good. And then I think on 16 weeks, we had some normal blood tests, and I was at work And so called and said that the nurses had called her and that she needs to come into hospital straight away. Is your partner available? Can you get into hospital? So we went in and they said, look, there is a problem here. And you're going to be scanned tomorrow. I think then we had to wait another day for a scan slot to open up, but with the consultant. And there was some abnormality in the blood return, the blood work. And best case scenario, having done her research when we got home, was that Frankie would have been, that's the name we gave him. Frankie would have been very severely disabled. That was our best case scenario. Worst case scenario, which is what came to pass, was that he'd died. So we went into hospital the next day, and it was then sort of it wasn't cold, but it had to be procedural from the doctors and the consultant, and we were asked whether we wanted medical or surgical intervention once it had become clear that he died. And we had to think about it, and we just said, look, is there any way that we can go home and think about it overnight? In hindsight, it was the best decision we made. It was also quite scary because it's very dangerous for Sophie or for somebody who's pregnant in that situation to sort of not be under medical supervision. So we went home and Sophie started having contractions about midnight. So she hadn't had any intervention. Her body just knew it was time.
It was time.
And she delivered Frankie at home. She was pretty incredible. We had 4 very young male paramedics who came into what I can only imagine. I mean, it was shocking for us. It must have been shocking for them. And Sophie was reassuring them, letting them know that she was okay. Telling me to pack a hospital bag, telling me to sort the dog out, all of that kind of stuff. You realise just what women are capable of in those situations, because I was flapping, I was all over the place. Obviously both very upset still, and no, she was pretty awesome. We went into hospital and we were there overnight. We had a room that we shared, and then the next day we had consultants coming in, and we had all of the stuff that follows. But almost immediately, Tommies were there in terms of information, in terms of support. The hospital were able to give you an awful lot of stuff, and I think 99% of it is Tommies. And immediately, so your focus turns onto them as a charity straight away. And we actually did. People were asking about sending flowers or gifts for Sophie or whatever else, and Sophie set a Just Giving page up for Tommies, and that was the first real interaction that we had with them. And then when we were trying again for what is now our 3-year-old son Edward, we were very, very lucky in that the support that Tommies give you and sort of the guidance as to what resources are available for you, who you might be able to see, how you might sort of access help. And I say guidance and stuff, not necessarily the medical nature, but support and, that kind of thing. So, Will, as you say, your brother-in-law, my old mate from school, sort of gave you the tap on the shoulder that I might like to be involved in something like this. Obviously, I was going to say yes, because all the way through our sort of little thing with the kids and whatever else, you realise that Tommy's isn't a charity that many people would probably be terribly aware of, unless unfortunately you or somebody close to you has been through this. But the work they do in a very underfunded area, because I think, it's a bit unheralded, but it is incredibly important. And it helps so many people. I'm just very glad I can do my very little part in helping you push this and get them some much needed coverage and money, obviously.
Yeah. Wow. Well, there's a lot, very thorough run through, and a lot to unpick. And as ever, they're not easy conversations to have, and it never ceases to surprise me how much hearing these sort of stories bring back a lot of emotions and a lot of similar feelings. And very sorry that you guys went through that. There's a few things to unpick in there. Firstly, with Sophie's first pregnancy, there were, as you say, you went for that first scan and there were 3 embryos there.
Yeah.
Then a couple of weeks later, you found out that mom wasn't viable.
Yeah.
One thing we talk about a lot with baby loss and with pregnancy loss, you're not necessarily losing something tangible. You're not losing a person that you knew. You're losing a person that you
Yeah.
dreamt of and hoped about and
Yeah.
plans that you made.
Yeah.
How do you unpick that when there's 3 sets of plans to be made? It's new house time, it's new car time, it's new this, that.
Yeah.
The extent of that planning and
Yeah.
that side of things, then to have that flipped on its head.
I think for us in that first situation, because the gap between finding out potentially that we might have triplets and then the pregnancy not being viable was I say I think it was probably less than a fortnight, maybe 10, 12 days.
Yeah.
There wasn't almost enough time to sort of start really getting worried about it, because for the time being, we'd not seen heartbeats and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
like
yeah.
that yet. We were getting close to that time. But as I said to you, even when you don't have that time, your mind goes there straight away. When we got back in the scan, Soap was shattered as that first few months, they're constantly tired, the
Yeah.
body's starting to change. I sat downstairs and I was sort of with every intention of turning the television on, and then realised I've been sat there for 40 minutes
Yeah,
playing Street. I was I was obviously thinking about it, and I was doing the sums and the logistics. And like you say, it is moving house time, it is new cars time, it's everything. But I think lucky is a word that Safe and I use about ourselves in this situation quite a lot. And I think from the outside looking in, you might say, well, none of this sounds terribly lucky. But ultimately, like yourself and Amy, we've got a young family now. So realistically, we are lucky. A bit unlucky as to what it took to get here, but we are lucky. And that's another one of those situations where I look back now and I think actually it was lucky. It was lucky that it didn't happen 6 weeks later on,
yeah,
because week by week everything is so much more tangible and so much more real. And if you're going to have that happen, and it's never nice, and you don't wish it upon anybody, but if it's going to happen, I think we were lucky in that it happened quite quickly,
yeah.
and that it wasn't as distressful as it might have been. The unlucky part probably came later with Frankie, as I say, but yeah, that one it sort of gave us a lot. We learned a lot very quickly. But the biggest thing was that we realized that we were able to get pregnant. As I say, that's such a hurdle for so many people that we clung on to that positive massively moving forward.
I can
And that
heavily
helped.
relate to that. I can
Yeah.
only begin to imagine how much more difficult it is when it's taken a year, or it's taken 2 years, or it's taken IVF,
Well,
and we touch on IVF and fertility journeys a lot more through as the challenge goes on. But
mm,
another sort of following through to Frankie, as you mentioned, there's this 12-week myth, 12-week
mm,
cut-off point that sort of seems to be very sacred within our society. I'm sure there's a lot of logic behind it, but having had a loss pre 12 weeks and
yeah.
then having had a loss post 12 weeks, for you and Sophie, was there second time round, was there an element of, okay, the first one happened, but now we're safe?
100%. I remember very, very vividly thinking, we're good. We're absolutely good. Because we had a couple of scans and we were consultant led for Edward and Isla, which meant we had a little more oversight, but scans, but we were having quite a lot of private scans, and we had 2 private scans in the 12 to 16 week gap. For no reason, so it didn't feel like there was anything wrong. It was a huge, huge. I really did think we got over that hurdle, because you hear stories and you hear of things going wrong, but like you say, there is this sort of I suppose societal, but within the pregnancy society, yeah, when you hit 12 weeks, yeah, tell your family and friends, it's going to be all good. And strangely enough, a friend of a friend is a fertility doctor down in London. He helped us massively, and I'll talk about him later on. Um, but when we were pregnant with Edward, even he said, okay, you're now in the 99.75% chance that your baby's going to be happy and healthy, because we'd hit the 13-week mark. We'd gone over the 12 weeks. So it's quite clearly that there's some sort of root as to that
Yeah.
reasoning medically, I suppose.
That's really interesting. I'd never heard it. I've never heard that put statistically before.
Yeah, it's you. But you and I sat here on a call, and you guys had it, and we've had it, and because of
Yeah.
Tommy, and because you talk to people, so many other people have. But I suppose the percentages work because there are so many babies being born.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I completely agree that that 12-week mark felt like a real threshold. And of course, that illusion was then just completely shattered for us moving forward.
Absolutely.
So there was no comfort.
Well, yeah, I
on
was
the
going
next
to
couple
ask
of
then.
times
So
round.
then, moving forward to Edward and Isla, how I'm always interested to know how people then approach that 12-week mark later on.
We completely ignored it to a certain extent. We told people, and we told people quite early, because we'd accepted that actually, and I know, I've heard you guys say it on podcast, and you and I have said it before. The loss is the loss whenever it happens. It doesn't matter if it's close to 12 weeks or it's after 2 weeks. If you've had a pregnancy first, and people are going to know that you're not right, and people will want to help, and people want to be there for you, no matter when it happens. We didn't wait to tell people at that stage, like I say, and basically we just ensured we were sort of constantly being monitored throughout both of them, until they arrived, basically. And
Yeah.
that was it.
No,
From the outside looking in, it might a bit mad, but we were very good customers of several scan places in the Midlands.
yeah. The more people I ask that question to, the more people say, if I'm going to have to go through that, I want my family and friends to be there and to be able to support me rather than
Well,
being
yeah,
blindsided
100%.
by a loss of pregnancy that they never knew existed in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, and people can't be there for you if they don't know what you're going through.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people might think, oh well, we don't want to, we don't want to put that on other people. But that's what those people are there for ultimately. And and you
Absolutely.
do the same for them if it ever happened, not that you wanted to, but those people and those closest to us were absolutely phenomenal. Both times round. And they can't be there for you if they don't know. So yeah, we just when Sophie got pregnant with Edward, we just told people and hope for the best.
There's also an element, I guess, of because you were pregnant the first time and had the loss, it's almost like the cat's out of the bag at that point. It's not like
Yeah,
it's not top secret that Louis and Sophie are trying to have
a
kids. Do you know,
trial.
like people, so people are going to ask the question anyway, aren't they? And it's whether
Yeah,
you take them along on that journey with you or
yeah,
shut them out and do everything on your own. And to me, there's one
yeah,
obvious approach. There's one obvious approach there.
yeah. I agree. 100%.
Perhaps a possibly obvious question to ask is
Yeah.
around the pregnancy after loss. You say you became best customers of some of the scan places and first name terms.
Yeah.
What was driving the desire to have those extra scans and obviously extra
Um,
reassurance, but what
yeah.
was behind that emotion wise?
I, I think for both of us, I don't want to talk too much for Sophie, but I do think for both of us, because she didn't know it had happened with Frankie, it was silent. There
Yeah,
was no great lead. There was no horrific pains. Until that blood test, there was nothing. It's the silence that puts you, at unease. And I think really, I just think it was reassurance. I know I felt a million times better each, and then this is going to sound crazy, but sometimes it really was each week. Yeah, baby's happy, baby's healthy, mum's doing good. And it was just it really, really helped us. It really helped me because we were just checking in basically. We were just checking in. And then towards the end of the pregnancy, towards the very end of the pregnancy, when they give you the band and everything at home and whatever else, we had a couple of him because he'd stopped kicking. He was terribly lazy. So we were up at the women's hospital in Birmingham quite a bit. But it was, yeah, I think just reassurance.
yeah.
And
About you speak there a lot about the pregnancy with Edward, how did that all translate into the pregnancy with Isla?
Less. It gets easier. It gets easier. But at the same time, I mean, maybe a quarter less scans, but still, if somebody was to see, the reassurance that we went through, it would have still looked like a lot to somebody from the outside looking in.
No, that's what I was going to say. Because obviously we've just welcomed Rupert into the world this week, just gone. So we've just rounded off a third pregnancy, and Amy was in triage at the drop of a hat, having had a successful pregnancy with Poppy. I've said it so many times. There are two lots of people in this world: those who have lost a pregnancy and those who haven't. I think that's a fairly binary division of society, and I think the mindset once you've had one is there for as many pregnancies as you may go on to have ad infinitum. It's just never goes away. The second Amy hinted that movements were down, something felt off, we went to hospital. There was just no question. Just gut feelings, isn't it? That just never go away. I feel like we need to revisit the scene with the four paramedics. The one thing that did strike me from that is it's these terms that you use, but you've used it yourself. Lucky in a way that Sophie started to go into labour, because again, I know of a few people that we'll talk to who've gone down the TFMR termination for medical reasons route, and the gut wrenching sort of conflict that comes with a decision like that. So there's small blessings in some ways for you from that perspective. But how do you reflect on the medical experience in circumstances like that? Obviously, for young paramedics who are in a situation which is pretty unfamiliar in general, but would probably for them, you've got to take your hat off to them to a certain extent. But just in general, across your two experiences of loss, what's your reflection on the medical experience?
The first one, because it was so early, didn't really require any intervention in terms of hospital. So you've had all of the ghastly after effects of early miscarriage, and that it knocks them about terribly. So while dealing emotionally with something, physically they're dealing with something absolutely just huge. With Frankie, medically, I thought hospital were incredible. I can't remember the exact dates, but it was in a period of time where I probably should have been allowed to stay with Sophie. It was in that COVID, we weren't in lockdown proper, but certainly hospitals were on pretty high alert. So her waters broke in bed, and she made it to the bathroom, delivered him in the bathroom. But then she was bleeding a lot. There was a decent loss of blood. The two ambulances arrived, and we were close to QE, but two ambulances arrived within easily under 5 minutes. Easily. And I hadn't had time to do anything that Sophie was telling me to do, like pack a bag for the hospital, like sort the dog out, like all of that kind of stuff. Although I probably could have had an hour at that stage, and I wouldn't have sorted any of it out either. And they turned up, and like you say, you can do a lot of training, but I can't imagine that anybody's ever sort of war gamed that for them. And they were, I couldn't get over the immediate empathy. They went to such great lengths to really, really try and make sure everything was okay. One of them was taking immediate care of Sophie. The other was taking immediate care of Frankie, who was this little thing who, was there. I thought that was incredible, because I couldn't have done that. And once we were in hospital and they said they were going to allow me to stay, that there was not much more they could have done. Not just from a medical point of view, because I think they know what they're doing in those circumstances, and they sorted Sophie out pretty quickly. But from a just caring and touch point, just making sure that we were not okay, we're not going to be okay in that situation, but as okay as we might be. And that meant we had two random consultants in the space of about 12 hours popping their head around the door. And they weren't looking after us, but they'd heard, and they came and just checked. But the staff at the queue were absolutely brilliant. And as I said to you, part of that was in the morning when Sophie was coming around, and we had some time with Frankie, was just very gently saying, right, this is how you go about getting support. These are the channels you need to look at. For example, the co-op do free funerals for infants, which includes babies at that age. Stuff that you'd never know, because why would you know? But if nobody tells you, and the nurses in the hospital did an awful lot of guidance, and in a very, very difficult time, I thought they were fantastic, absolutely brilliant. We became consultant led for Edward. I would say the exact same. He was a fantastic chap, very understanding, sort of entertained mine and Soph's abject paranoia because something must go wrong, because it has now twice. I mean, they were just brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Good, and that's one thing that doesn't tend to vary again in these conversations. So it's good to hear. The very interesting part of your story, particularly in relation to the challenge that we're doing and the charity that we're raising money for, is that you have had significant contact with and sort of familiarity with Tommy's and the work that they do.
Yeah.
And you also went down that journey to if that's the right word, of we've had two now, what's going on? How do we figure that out? So, can you give us an overview, if you like, of what Tommy's were there for, what they helped with, and what you perhaps did on your own, and how those two worlds intertwine slightly?
The morning after we'd been in hospital and so delivered Frankie, the lovely consultant said, popped his head around the door. And we were already sort of in the zone of questions, what should we do? What's the situation here? And he referred, not referred us as in the medical time, but he said, look, what you've got to do is look at Tommy's and look at Professor Quimby in Coventry. And I think the information that we'd had previously was it was after 3.
Mm.
So we didn't really think that would be an avenue that was potentially open to us. But after a week or so, Sophie started making sort of overtures and looking at what might. In the meantime, as I said earlier, we were referred by a friend to a chap called Adrian Lauer down in London. Adrian's a specialist fertility doctor. I think his specialty is IVF and placement of embryos and that kind of thing. And he very, very kindly saw us off his own back at his clinic. And really, he gave us the reassurance that everything was okay with us. So we went down the road in London and had a test, and I don't have the name of it here, but it covers a few things. And the results of that came back, and there was basically nothing to worry about other than Soph's body didn't naturally absorb folic acid, but then she had sort of a folic acid supplement, not the one that was essentially already something or other, so that her body could absorb it. And then post that, we were seen, I think, 3 times by Professor Quimby over in Coventry. And obviously that is a Tommy's Run area ward, I suppose. And yeah, it's very, very impressive what they do there, because obviously pretty much everybody in that ward were people in situations where they've had potentially 3 or more losses. So you were sat amongst your peers, if you like. But that really was the first proper experience of what Tommy's fund and how important their work is. And that sort of gives you an indication of just how much work they're doing for people and families. And that was it. And she was also on clepsane injections to sort of preempt any potential spotting or bleeding throughout. And that was sort of at the behest of Adrian. And he also knew Professor Quimby. Of course, they knew in the exact same circles.
Yeah, of course.
And he also knew the consultant at the QE to whom we were placed. And that is, when I say lucky, that's an incredible stroke of luck for us. And it's a resource that we wouldn't have had we not had a friend who knew him.
Yeah.
So as I said to you earlier, when I say that we were lucky, that might sound crazy. But actually, in the context of this and other people's issues, we really were. It might not have felt like it at the time, but looking back now, we were. And for Edward's, or for Steve's pregnancy with Edward, rather, sorry, we had a phenomenal level of support through Tommy's and the team at Coventry, through the consultant in Birmingham, and then down at Adrian Lau's place in London. And that, well, I said about reassurance earlier, that when you've got Tommy's and the consultant saying everything's great, and you sort of checking in fortnightly and private scans on top of that, we had the reassurance we needed throughout that period, and we were.
I really get what you're saying about the lucky factor. It seems an odd thing to say, but I've always said, and Amy and I have always said, it's not a competition as to who's had the worst loss or what have you, but I certainly very often having these conversations feel and genuinely feel that Amy and I were very fortunate in many ways with how quickly we were able to get pregnant, with how quickly we've been blessed to welcome two beautiful children into the world. And so using that term lucky isn't as daft as it sounds, perhaps.
No.
Putting it bluntly. One, you mentioned that you had 3 or 4 appointments with Tommy's over at Coventry.
Yeah.
Was that predominantly in the sort of conception process?
It was, for us, it was early stages of the Edward's pregnancy. So she did refer her for Tommy's after Frankie, but it took that long to get seen, that actually we were seen by the time we were pregnant. So obviously that just shows the sort of the how busy they are and how many people get referred to them. So, and I think we did get pregnant very quickly again, but it would have been 6 months or so, I suppose, maybe a touch longer because of everything that happened after Frankie. So I think probably less investigative stuff because we were pregnant then, and more sort of reassurance and the level of testing and the level of AHS. If yours were a routine pregnancy or if you hadn't had a loss, so there was sort of, certainly for me as well, knowing the reputation and having seen some stuff that Sophie sent me about Professor Quimby and the work that she was doing. It was sort of very pioneering and absolute, was, as you say, it's that reassurance thing again, isn't it? That it was incredibly reassuring. So we probably didn't have as much that Tommy's could help us with at that stage, but the help that we did get was again invaluable. It was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I think anyone that we speak to who has come into contact with Tommy's, even if just through using their website as a resource, and the reams of information that are available there before you even get into the in-person contact that is available. Anyone I've spoken to who's been through a loss have said how invaluable a service it is that Tommy's offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's, you mentioned that you came across Tommy's and you came across Professor Crumley because a kindly consultant happened to pop his head round your door. I don't doubt that someone may have mentioned them to you at some point down the line, but it was interesting speaking with Alex a couple of weeks ago, who's a midwife. She was on the podcast with Charlie, and she said that they have a bereavement team within the hospital and they have a bereavement midwife. But once that immediate medical care has happened, their route for people in that scenario is to hand them over to the charities. And so I think that in and of itself, and it varies trust to trust, but I think it just goes to show how enormous a role the charities have to play in particularly in baby loss, and I'm sure it happens in other areas of medicine as well. But particularly, it seems within baby loss, there is so much more to unpick psychologically, physiologically, for both the male and the female perspective with fertility journeys and loss journeys. It is just too much for the NHS at times, and that's where these charities really come into their own, and particularly with Tommy's, and you've got first-hand experience of this, to see how in some ways ingrained into the medical system they are. Obviously They're born out
Yeah.
of a team at St Thomas's in the early 90s, and as you say, when you went to see them, you went to Coventry Hospital and went to the Tommy's wing, essentially.
Yeah.
there-
Absolutely.
and it's all funded, or largely funded, charitably.
Yeah, and like you say, it's yeah, the NHS behemoth though it is, those wards and those maternity wards and whatever else, they only have a certain bandwidth, and quite rightly, all of their attention should be on the immediate medical issue. And so, like you say, then they do rely on the charitable endeavours of people like Tommy's. And we had coincidentally enough, of course, it's when you've had a baby loss, a bereavement in hospital. It's those say little things. They're not little really in context. They might appear little, but they're not. It's those things that help you enormously at those stages. And the guidance and the information that Thomas provided is an incredible help to people who will be completely lost because you are. I mean, there are very few people who'd have been a bit more researched and better versed in anything related to this than so. That's sort of how she operates, and it's brilliant. But you are at a loss. And yeah, the charities step in and they do a fantastic job.
Yeah. Looking, it sounds like, difficult as those times were, you, and particularly Sophie from the sound of things, were very proactive around looking for answers, seeking support. There would be others who aren't, or are in a position psychologically, as much as anything else, of not being able to look for those answers. It can be very
Yeah.
crushing, the position you find yourself in. What advice, looking back on those weeks and months, what advice would you give to someone going through that time, that you felt perhaps you and Sophie did well, things that helped, or even
Yeah.
things that you look back and think, we could have done this differently, we could have done more?
I certainly don't think anybody can do or should feel like they could have done more, because that it's so contextual, isn't it? You don't know what more looks like in those situations.
Yeah.
From a research point of view and from a what next point of view, um, was very proactive. But what I think we got right, to us took well over a fortnight, and we were just at home, and people were visiting when they felt up to it. And we saw people and whatever else, but we just spent a lot of time together, and you can talk. If you want to talk, you can be very upset when you want to be very upset. And as I say, it goes towards that whole feeling like we were lucky in that situation in as far as it goes. Friends of ours have subsequently had losses. Sort of qualifies as advice, but the only thing I'd said to them was just make the other one of you the priority for as long as you can. Once you're then in a headspace to start thinking, okay, what next? I would say go on Tom's website, go and look at next steps, go and look at what emotional therapy support they might advise, because there's no right way or wrong way of getting through it. But the resources give you a load of examples and give you a load of people's testimonials. That's not right, but their stories, if you like. And ultimately, the more information you might have to be able to try and process it, even though it's not always going to be specific to you. Obviously, every single event like this is very different. That they're there and they're a fantastic resource. So the two things I'd say is, take as much time as you feel you need before you start throwing yourself into it. But if your decision is that you're going to try again, then the more information you have, the more sort of touch points you have, the better. And I know it really helps Safe and I going forward, albeit, like we've said, you still need those reassurances, because that little nag never goes away. But yeah, the more information, the better is the only thing I would say. And I'm very lucky, so sort of devours that stuff, and I get it secondhand. I try and cling on to some of it.
Often
But,
it's the way,
yeah.
Louis. It's often the way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So no,
The other thing from you, sorry, the other thing from your story there that stands out is you were talking to someone in London who was an expert in this field. You were talking to someone at the QE. You were talking to Professor Quemby, and there are many others that work within the Tommy's organisation. They are world renowned. They are
Yeah.
world class. They are leading the field in these topics, and I think that's a real feather in the cap for Tommy's as a charity. You're dealing with and getting access to the very best on a charitable basis, and that's phenomenal. And I think probably the last question to ask is when you went to Tommy's, because I think this is often an issue for people. They can feel that they're being a burden, or they can feel that it's hassle, and again, particularly within those darker times, it's very easy to look negatively upon yourself, I guess, and diminish the situation that you're in. How easy was it to access Tommy's, and how welcoming were they of you?
Incredibly welcoming. They have to have criteria because they're as you touched upon, they're majorly charitably funded, so they don't have absolutely every resource, and they can't see everybody, unfortunately. I'd say incredibly welcoming. Yeah, I'd say, look, you approach them. It is quite literally what they're there for. And although you can't control how you might feel, like you say, you don't be a burden, you don't potentially want to reach out. Are we the worst case scenario? Are there people in a worse opposition? Yes, there will always be. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get the help that you might be able to get from Tommy's. And it's one of the best things we did. And they very much obviously want people to do so. So it's what they're there for and what they do.
I think the moral of this story is that Tommy's are brilliant, and all they need is a bit more money. So if anyone's listening, please visit www.marathonsmiracles.com and click on donate now at the top of the screen, because these are the sorts of cases that your money is helping towards, and the work that that's helping to fund. Running. We've got to do some running on Sunday, Louis.
We have. Yeah, we have. Just a little.
As a bit of an update, I guess, I think I've just completed week 5. The body's feeling pretty good. We're ticking through. I'm struggling with my feet. As a man who is over 6 foot and not designed for running, I think the feet are taking the brunt of it. Everything else feels good. How are you prepped? How are you looking forward to it? Experience, I guess. What's the background? You said yes very quickly, but I don't know if that was all Tommy's related.
Tommy's related, sort of Will Cooper related, because I know that he'd sort of referred you to me. So I'm not going to say no to something that sort of he wanted me to be involved in, better or worse over the years. Running related, I was never ever a long distance runner, nor am I now. But played a lot of sports at school. Ticked off a marathon in Madrid a few years ago with my brother, which was tough. It was a very hot day, but it was enormous fun. And rightly or wrongly, I've got in my head, well, look, I know I can do it. I didn't do much training for that one, and that it showed in that I didn't get a fantastic time, so a smidge over 4 hours. But yeah, as you know, I've been away recently for a while, but we've been running in the heat. Doing bits and pieces, and I'm not too worried about the body. We'll get round. It might be a little bit slow at times, but we've got some nice stops planned, and we're running in a nice neck of the woods. So now I'm excited for it. It is what it is. You just have to get round, don't you?
I think that's going to become increasingly the psychology. Is as long as we can get round, we'll be all right.
Yeah.
So where are we running on Sunday? Tell us a little bit about the route. We're sort of very much in your back garden, are we?
Yeah. Well, my new back garden. Yeah. So we're going to start at Warwick Castle at about 8:30 in the morning, I think, depending on how much sleep you've got, whatever else.
Yeah.
We're going to go from Warwick to Henley-in-Arden, which is going to be our first very brief stop. But we're going to have people there ahead of time to get us an ice cream, possibly the best ice cream shop in the UK, in my opinion.
That's a big call. That is a very big call. I'm going to...
Yeah, it might... I don't know. The proof is in the eating. And I'm sure ice cream can't be a bad thing to have.
If this challenge turns into an ice cream judging competition as the months goes on, I'll get happier and happier as we go. But I'll take one ice cream at least for now.
Yeah. And from Henley, we then run to Stratford-upon-Avon, and there will be a cake and a refuel and bits and pieces available for us there. Get some people to meet us there. And then from Stratford-upon-Avon, we then run to Alcester, and we live in a little village just outside Alcester. And our local, the Golden Cross, is all set up to host us as you and I stagger in, I'm sure, hopefully within a respectable time. And obviously people can meet us there. I said to you, I think we're going to pick up a couple of runners along the way, which would be lovely. So yeah, we take in a few of the very nice spots around here. I've seen you've been going through some what looks like proper trail running. So you'll be happy to know we're mostly grass verges and road for pretty much the entirety of this.
Nice.
So it might be a little bit easier, a little less steep. There are some low and slow inclines, I'll tell you that. And it's on the cycle route that I used to do a lot, but we'll get around. It will be okay.
Sounds as the weeks go on, I'm increasingly appreciative of the people that we're running with and the effort that goes into the day itself. I've got to be careful that my ego doesn't run away with me. I sort of turn up each week and there's a support crew, and I run around a corner and there's a drink station and a snack station and all this sort of thing. So, but it is fantastic. But it's testament to the community that we're building, I think, and everyone's very keen to make their week special, and it's a chance to remember why we're doing it, chance to remember Frankie and many, many others that have been lost. I'm really looking forward to it. Luckily, given our recent arrival, it's close enough to home.
Yeah.
Well, fingers crossed, the gang might come along and watch, given that it's quite close. But if not, I can get home in good time afterwards, without getting in the bad books too much. So. Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. Louis, thanks so much for sharing your stories. As I said earlier, they never get easier to talk about, but I never cease to appreciate, hopefully, the good that they're doing for others, and being able to listen to them. And also as well, your and Sophie's valuable experience with Tommy's and the brilliant work that they're doing. That's our first sort of touch point with Tommy's work directly. So thank you for that. And we'll see you at the weekend.
Yeah, see you on Sunday. Can't wait.